I don't know about you, but I feel like going and getting my toes done right now. Does anybody else want a pedicure? Anybody else feel like a pedicure or a massage? Like, how good was that? I almost feel like we could have just played that for the next half an hour. It would have been fantastic. By the way, those men in the room that are thinking to themselves, does that guy actually get pedicures? The answer is yes. My wife, about 10 years ago, took me on my birthday to get a pedicure together. And I was like, oh my goodness, how have the women been keeping us away from this for so many years? This is like a secret they've been keeping from us. And so I turned in my man card that day, and I've been getting them ever since. Mostly with my wife, but occasionally without her as well. So, hey, my name's Jason. A lot of people refer to me as Perko. If you are familiar with the Australian culture at all, you'll know that we love to butcher the English language. And so any word that we can possibly shorten and add an O or a Y to the end of, we like to do that. So if you're a carpenter, you're actually a chippy. If you're an electrician, you're a sparky. And I don't know how else to explain. That's how I got my nickname Perko. My last name is Perkins, and so they just added an O to the end of it. I'm also excited to be here this morning for a number of reasons. I love coming to New Zealand. I get to go to Waiheke Island this week. I actually have made it a goal that I don't come to New Zealand without visiting Waiheke Island. It's such a favorite place of mine. The other reason I'm pumped to be here this weekend especially is because I flew over from Brisbane. I live in Brisbane, and I flew over yesterday afternoon with a bunch of other people going to a game. And I am not a Broncos fan, so I was thrilled when the Warriors destroyed the Broncos yesterday. So up the Waz, I'm a huge fan and stoked to be here this morning. Hey, that has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today, but it's fun to talk about nonetheless. So here's what I'd love to do. The first time I was here at Grace City, I was actually reflecting on this. It was about 2 years ago or so now. And I kind of dove into this idea of soul care, which I describe it this way. There's a lot of descriptions or definitions around soul care, but my best working definition is this. It's tending to the garden of your inner life. I would say it this way. For most of my life and most of my leadership, I was trained and equipped and I practiced harvesting the forest of my external life. But I didn't spend much time, and I hadn't really been trained on what it looked like to tend to the garden of my inner life. And when I first came to Grace City, I talked about this idea that everything that we do for Jesus has to flow out of our being with Jesus. Most of my life was busy up until about 10 years ago, just doing a lot for Jesus, but I wasn't spending much time actually just being with Jesus. And so this morning, I want us to kind of continue that conversation. If you don't mind, I'd love to do that. If you weren't here, by the way, a couple of years ago, totally understand. Good news is this: they keep everything on the internet nowadays. So as long as there's still electricity and the internet, you can go back and watch anything that happens here at Grace City. And I would encourage you to go check out that from a couple of years ago. And many of the other messages, especially if you're here for the first time, you can check out all the messages online. Some people are actually watching online right now, which is super exciting. Here's what I'd love to do this morning to kick things off. I love playing games. I've shared this before here at Grace City. I'm a PE teacher by profession, so I have a 4-year degree in whistleblowing, and I'm really, really good at it. I didn't bring a whistle this morning, so you don't have to block your ears, but we are going to play a game. So if you're able, I would love it if you would stand with me. We're going to play a game that we've actually played here at Grace City before. It's a game called Face Off, and if you're watching online, I would love it if you're able to join us. You can stand as well, even if you're in a coffee shop. It's going to be weird for everyone around you, but you can play along and you might get to win a prize as well. So here's how the game works. I bring up on the screen a couple of images in just a moment, and you're going to have to pick which of the images you think is correct for the question that's being asked. And so you'll actually face the direction of the image that you think is correct. So you're going to be facing this direction, or you're going to be facing this direction. And today's face-off game is the speed edition, okay? So we're looking for the thing on the screen which is faster than the other one, the fastest of the two options, all right? So let's just play a practice round, okay? First round is a practice round. Everyone will stay in the game even if you don't get it right, okay? You'll get around, you at least make it to the second round, okay? Unlike the Australian cricket team in the T20 right now. All right, so here's the first round. Which is faster, the antelope or the cheetah? So if you think it's the antelope, you're gonna face this direction. If you think it's the cheetah, you're gonna face this direction, okay? Most people have made the decision. If you're still facing me, by the way, that indecision will get you out, okay? All right, so you get 3 seconds. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, the answer is the cheetah. And I think everybody in the room is still standing, unless you were a cheater, and now you are still, by the way, cheating in church, not a good idea, okay? Of all the places, probably not church. All right, next slide, next image. Bolt or Blake? Which one do you think is fastest? Is it Bolt or is it Blake? Fastest man on the planet still, okay? Is it Bolt or Blake, all right? If you think it's Bolt, you're facing this way. If you think it's Blake, you're going that way. In 3, 2, 1, the answer is Bolt, okay? These, by the way, are gimmies, all right? These are just easy. Everybody should still be in the game. I hate, if you're not still in the game, I don't mean to point you out, but you notice the rest of the room is still in the game. All right, next slide. Which is faster? I'm not even gonna try and pronounce the names of these. Fastest car on the planet as of 2023, okay? So there could be something faster, and there's always that guy in the crowd that's like a real petrol head, and he'll come to me after the service and say, you know, there's a faster car now. All right, this is last year, all right? So you've got 3 seconds, you gotta make the decision one way or the other. If you're still facing me, I don't mean to point anybody out down in the front row down here, but if you're still facing me, you'll be out, okay? You ready? In 3, 2, 1, the answer is? All of you red is faster people, you got duped by a red car. You think that just because you have a red car, the police officer pulls you over. That's not the case, all right? The black car was faster in this case. All right, what about this next one? Fastest wind speed ever recorded on the planet, okay? Fastest wind speed ever recorded on the planet. Was it Mount Washington, which is actually from my wife's home state of New Hampshire. My wife is originally from New Hampshire, and it's Mount Washington, or Barrow Island, which is an island off the coast of WA in Western Australia. It's mostly, I think, a coal or a mining island now. All right, you've got 3 seconds. Fastest wind speed ever recorded Barrow Island this way, Mount Washington this way. In 3, 2, 1, the answer is Barrow Island. Now, for those of you that were facing Mount Washington, good news for you, it used to hold the record. And then Barrow Island came along and stole it. Can you believe that? Of all the things to do to steal that kind of a record, most of you are in the room thinking, who even records these things, okay? Last image is this image here. One of my favorite movies of all time. This takes me back to my childhood. Now, this is the original, by the way, not that phony one that came out a few years ago. This is the original. You got to go back decades to get to this movie. So who said this in the movie? This line from the movie, very famous line, I feel the need for speed. Was it Maverick or was it Goose? Okay, and you've got to make a decision, all right? You can't still be facing me. And by the way, if you're wondering what's on the line, there is a box of Cadbury's favorites on the line. This is a very, very important gift, all right? So in 3, okay, you've got to be facing one direction or the other. A couple of people indecisive here. Okay, ready? In 3, 2, 1. Oh. Mel, did you say both of them? No? You honestly didn't know? I feel like this whole section of the crowd over here needs to share some favorites this morning. So would you do me a favor? Would you just open that and then just pass them around and they can enjoy those? Because really, that last question, that's just a way to eliminate everybody from the game. It's not really, it's like the classic school teacher that forgot to bring the prize and they just eliminate everybody from the game. Well, here's what I know to be true. When I Googled fastest things on the planet, when I Googled this, I discovered that there were a lot of things that came up in my Google search. A lot of things popped up as fastest things on the planet. I also Googled slowest things on the planet. Here's the deal. You'll find almost no results. Because here's the reality. We live in a world that loves celebrates and rewards speed. We live in a culture that loves it, they reward it, and they celebrate it. In fact, think back to your earliest memories, even in childhood. I think back to my school memories. When I was in the classroom, my teacher loved kids that got assignments done or quizzes or tests done quickly, so much so that they would celebrate it and they reward it. You remember lines like this possibly: whoever gets done with this first gets to go to lunch early or gets to go to recess early. And so we live in a culture from our earliest age where we celebrate and we reward speed. Here's what you know to be true already, especially the parents in the room. You know this. Whatever gets rewarded gets what? Gets repeated. Every time you reward something, especially with a child, you reward them for doing something, they'll tend to repeat those things. And so that's what's happened in our culture today. We reward this idea of efficiency and speed, and every time we reward something, it gets repeated. Here's what's happened in our culture today, and I've experienced this personally, and maybe you resonate with this. We've come up with this idea now in our culture today called artificial urgency. And here's kind of the way I describe artificial urgency. We'll put this definition. It's the art of making something that isn't urgent, urgent. Like, for instance, when I was a kid, I remember in primary school, I couldn't wait to get into high school. And then when I got into high school, I was so excited about getting my driver's license, I couldn't wait to get my driver's license. And so I was one of those kids that when I turned 16, I had already booked the appointment, I took the test, I got my driver's license, and I couldn't wait. After I got my L's in Australia, we have a learner's permit for a year. I couldn't wait to get my P's, and then I couldn't wait to get off my P's. When I was in high school, I couldn't wait to get out of high school. I couldn't wait to go to university. And when I got to university, I couldn't wait to graduate from university so I could get a first real job and make real money. And the moment that I graduated and I got a first real job, I couldn't wait to be married. I couldn't even possibly imagine being 23 years old and still single. I couldn't wait to get married. It was just a crazy idea. And as soon as I got married, here was the funniest thing. My wife and I, as soon as we got married, we couldn't wait to have children. And then once we had children, this is crazy, we couldn't wait for them to go to school. And then when they went to school, we started paying school fees, and we couldn't wait for them to graduate so that we could stop paying school fees. In fact, my youngest son he graduated last year, and we quit paying school fees, and we thought to ourselves, you know what, we could take all that money that we've been paying and put it towards like their inheritance, and then we decided, no, we're just gonna go and tour and travel around the world. But now we have a daughter that's married, and we are so excited about it. And we can't wait for her, no pressure by the way, Jack and Olivia, if you're watching online, we can't wait for them to have children. And here's what my youngest told me just a couple of days ago. My youngest son said to me, you know, Dad, he said, you know, a lot of grandparents are now starting to pay school fees for their grandchildren. And I was like, okay, hold off on the grandkids for a little bit. But isn't it true? We have this culture of artificial urgency where we can't wait for the next thing. The thing that isn't urgent, we have this kind of art of making it seem urgent. And so because of this, we've fallen into this kind of cultural consensus, I call it, where bigger is better and going further faster seems to be the pursuit of all of us. This has become so pervasive in our culture and in our society. In fact, over the last decade, there's been a medical term that's been coined now. It was first talked about over a decade ago in journals in Psychology Today and so on. This idea of what people are referring to now as hurry sickness. Hurry sickness. It's an actual medical term. And here's some of the symptoms of hurry sickness. Maybe this resonates with some of the culture and society that you're living in here in Auckland. It says that hurry sickness causes increased anxiety, decreased focus, increased anger, increased debt. The list was long. I couldn't put it all on one slide, so I thought I'd just stop there. But here's what I'd love to do this morning with you. As we think about this idea of hurry sickness, I'd love for us to just take a quick inventory this morning, just a brief inventory. And so I'd love it if you would, you can take out your phone and maybe open the app where you take notes. And I'm just going to give you a quick hurry sickness inventory. Some of you in the room are saying, you know what, I don't think I struggle with hurry sickness. And I'd love for you just to take a quick assessment. We're going to put a couple of things up on the screen, and I'm going to read them off slowly to you. And I want you just to think, which of these resonates with you? Maybe just put the number down on your notes of any of the ones that resonate with you. Number 1, do you feel like everything in life is a race? Like, do you find yourself sometimes pulling up at a set of traffic lights and switching lanes because one has less cars in it than the other? Or maybe you're at Countdown and you're checking out and you're looking at all the self-service checkout lines and you're trying to figure out, is it quicker for me to go to self-checkout or is it quicker for me to join one of these lines? Is everything a race? Number 2, has multitasking become your MO? Like, that's just your default. Tend to think, oh, I could do 3 or 4 things at the same time. I can check my email while I'm also watching something on YouTube. Has it become your MO? Number 3, this one's, just reading it is triggering for me. Are delays triggering for you? You were supposed to take 20 minutes to drive to some appointment and you plug it into Google Maps and all of a sudden you see the dreaded red line and you know that it's going to take you 27 instead of 20 minutes like it normally does. Is that triggering for you? Number 4, do you always feel like you're behind? Like you have way more to do than you have time to do it in? Do you ever have that feeling like, man, I just don't have enough time to get everything done? Number 5, do you catch yourself interrupting or talking over people in conversations? Most people that this resonates with don't know that they do that. So if your spouse is maybe nudging you, that might be an indicator that that one resonates with you. Number 6, do you get an unusual amount of joy? Maybe you're a bit obsessive around just ticking things off your to-do list. These are some signs of people that struggle with this idea of hurry sickness. But here's the good news. Even if you're not a church person, good news is this. This is a human issue. So if you're in the room this morning and you think that Christians don't struggle with hurry sickness, every single one of us in the room struggles with hurry sickness to some degree. So you're in good company. But the good news is this, that Jesus actually offers us a different way of living. Jesus was incredibly countercultural. You'll notice if you read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with the Bible, that's the first 4 books of the second half of the Bible called the New Testament. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are 4 biographies of Jesus' life written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Super creative with their biography names. And so you can read about the life of Jesus. And here's what you'll find. Reading through the stories about the life of Jesus, Jesus was never in a hurry. He never ran to any appointments. In fact, people ran to see Jesus, but Jesus was never in a hurry and he never ran. He has this beautiful invitation. I love this invitation that one of the biography writers, a guy named Matthew, he wrote this invitation that Jesus gave. He says it this way. Let's read it. You can actually read along on the screen. He says this, are you tired? Are you worn out? Burned out on religion? And then this is the invitation Jesus gave. Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. And then I love these words, walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. And then he goes on to say, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. What a beautiful invitation. Jesus says, hey, come and get away with me. If you walk with me and if you watch me, you'll actually learn how to do life in a way that is sustainable and that doesn't feel heavy or ill-fitting. And so this morning, I want us to watch the way Jesus attacked artificial urgency. Actually, I want us to see the way Jesus actually went and took care of something that wasn't artificially urgent. It was actually urgent. in a way that we can learn from him by watching how he did it, how we can address this artificial urgency that we're faced with in our culture. I'll give you some context. Jesus loved to teach and he loved to do miracles, oftentimes by a sea or by a lakeside. And so in this particular story, he's crossed over to the other side of the lake, and some people have gathered around him. Mark, one of the other biography writers in the New Testament, he records the story for us. He says these words. You can follow along on the screen if you'd like, or if you've got your Bible with you, or maybe the Bible app, you can follow along. It's in Mark chapter 5, verse 21. It says, when Jesus had crossed over to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him. And while he was by the lake, it says that there was a synagogue leader, a guy named Jairus, who came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at Jesus' feet. And he pleaded with him earnestly. He said, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and lived. Now, this is not artificial urgency for Jairus, okay? Let's just be honest. Jairus' daughter is dying. He's not racing to get out of high school so that he can go to university and get a real job and one day get married, all the things. It's not artificial urgency like I described before. Jairus' daughter is dying, and he knows that Jesus has the ability to heal because the stories are being circulated, and he comes to him earnestly begging Jesus to come and heal his daughter. So listen to Jesus' response. Mark records, so Jesus ran as fast as he could, jumped on a chariot with him, and hurried to the daughter's side. Now, some of you are thinking, no, I don't think that's what actually happened. That's Perko's paraphrase, by the way, the little PP there next to the reference. That's Perko's paraphrase. Here's what actually happened in the story. Those that are tracking and following along, it just says, Mark records, so Jesus went with him. Let me fill in the blank of what went with him looked like. Jesus walked with Jairus on his way to Jairus' house to see his daughter. And then Mark records for us this huge interruption in the story, a massive interruption. Here's what he says. He goes on to say, a large crowd followed and pressed around him. So it's Smart Park, right, where the Waz won last night. You imagine leaving the game last night, and you're trying to get to the train or you're trying to get to the bus or whatever it is, and there's tens of thousands of people all leaving the place at the same time. And so you're crowded and pressed in by people all around you. You've been there in those situations. Maybe it wasn't a footy game. Maybe it was some sort of concert that you've been to. And you're kind of doing one of these numbers where you're trying to get through the crowd and people are all pressed in around you. That's what's happening in the story. It says a large crowd followed and pressed around him. And then it goes on to say, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. 12 years. Some of you in the room, maybe some of you watching online, you've had some sickness in your life that's been going on for months, even years, perhaps even a decade, and you've been in search for a cure to try and relieve the pain and discomfort. You know exactly what this lady was going through. Some of you have never experienced that type of thing. I just want to tell you, if you have a sickness that is chronic like that continues year after year after year, it is something that begins to take over your entire life. And that's the case with this woman. It goes on to tell us that this woman, she had suffered and she had gone around to a number of different doctors. In fact, Mark tells us that she spent everything she had. She spent all of her money trying to find a solution to this problem. And she was desperate in need of healing. She had heard about this guy named Jesus, and so she found out that he was a healer, and so she came to him wanting to be healed. And she got to the point she was so desperate that she knew that if she could just reach out and touch Jesus, his power to heal might heal her in that moment. So that's exactly what she did. She went and she reached out, and Mark tells us that she touched the hem of Jesus' cloak, the bottom of his coat, and immediately when she touched Jesus' coat, she was healed in that moment. And she knew it, that she had been freed from this sickness. Not only did she know it, but Mark goes on to record for us that Jesus also realized that power had gone out from him, and he turned around in the crowd and asked this question, "Who touched me?" Now remember, some of you are laughing, me too, when I read the story. Remember, he's leaving the game and everyone's pressing in around him. Remember, the crowd is everywhere. Jesus has the audacity to turn and ask the question, "Who touched me?" If I'm one of the disciples, I'm like, "Everyone touched you, Jesus." The whole crowd is touching you because everyone is tight, pressed in together, trying to get to the bus or trying to get to the train. We're all pressed in, Jesus. Everyone is touching you. But that wasn't enough for Jesus. Jesus wanted to know who had touched him because he knew that power had left his body. And so Jesus is persistent. He goes on to say, "And who touched me?" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman who had been suffering for 12 years, she came to Jesus, Mark tells us in verse 33, and she fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, she told him the whole truth of what had happened. Now, some of you here this morning, when you think about God, you kind of think about God the same way this woman did. That God is somehow going to do something to you because of the life that you've led, or maybe the story that you've kind of lived out of. And you come to God. In fact, you may have even come into the building this morning with a bit of fear and trembling. Some of you may have said to a friend that invited you, "Hey, if I go in there, are you sure the building's still going to be standing? Maybe something will get struck by lightning." Like, you come to God with fear and trembling. I hope if that's your case, don't miss the way that Jesus responds to this woman who comes to him with fear and trembling. This is so powerful. The rabbi responds to her. Listen to what he says. "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." If you think that God has it out for you, that if God knew you were in this building this morning, that he would somehow burn the place down, I want you to hear these words that Jesus says to this woman as words that he says to you. Your faith can heal you. You can be free from your pain and suffering. And Jesus longs to do that for you in your life. Now, if you've missed this part of the story so far, remember what Jesus was on his way to do? Like, this is a major sidetrack to the story. In fact, not just a sidetrack to the story, but this is a major interruption. There's a girl that's dying right now. Not artificial urgency, real urgency. I can only imagine Jairus is wondering to himself, why are we stopping for all of this craziness in the crowd? My daughter is dying right now. Mark actually records for us that a group of people came from Jairus' house while Jesus was still speaking. It says in verse 35, some people came and they told him, "Your daughter is dead." They said, "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus responds. He says, "Don't be afraid, just believe." And then Jesus told them, "Let's go." He went to the house and he didn't let everyone follow him. Mark records for us that he only brought Peter, James, and John, his three closest friends, with him. And when they got to the house, there was a lot of commotion. Mark records for us, there's a lot of commotion. People are crying. People are wailing. They're devastated that Jesus took so long to get to the house. Why did he delay with that woman that touched his garment? Because now this girl is dead. So Jesus goes into the house, and Mark records for us that he actually said to the group of people in there, "This child is not dead, but asleep." And then they laughed at him. The crowd in the house laughed at him. So after Mark says that Jesus put everybody out, I love the way Mark describes that. After he put them all out, I can only imagine Jesus probably ushered them out pretty quickly and forcefully. But Mark graciously says, after Jesus put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And then don't miss this last line in the story from Mark. Immediately, Mark says, the girl stood up and began to walk around. Notice the parentheses. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. How old was the little girl? She was 12 years old. How long had the woman been suffering from this sickness? 12 years. It's almost as if Jesus had known for 12 years that this day would come, and there was no need to hurry. There was no need to rush. There was no need for artificial urgency. And I love the way the author and speaker Mike Todd says it. He says that Jesus walked at a pace of grace. Jesus walks at a pace of grace. And not only does Jesus walk at a pace of grace, but Jesus invites all of us, follower of Jesus or not a follower of Jesus, Jesus invites all of us to walk at a pace of grace. In fact, this is the invitation for all of us this morning, whether you're watching online or here in the room. Here's the invitation. Jesus is inviting us to live at a pace where we can both experience and extend God's grace. See, the truth is, you can't extend God's grace if you haven't experienced God's grace first. I like to say it this way: you can't give what you don't possess. So the invitation is to live at a pace where we both experience God's grace, but we can extend God's grace to others, but we can't give what we don't possess. So here's the question for us this morning. Here's the first question. Where in your life, in what area of your life do you need to slow down long enough to experience God's grace in your life? Where in your life, in what area of your life do you first need to slow down long enough to experience God's grace in your life? I want to bring up, as we wrap up, that inventory that we went through just a few moments ago. I'm going to have them bring it up on the screen, and I'd love for you to take out your phone and consider right now. I want to just give you a moment to think about this list. What's one area on this list that perhaps God is inviting you even today to slow down long enough to experience God's grace in your life? Perhaps this week the invitation for you is to simply not change lanes at a set of lights to get into the shortest lane. Or maybe the invitation for you this week is to simply get into the longest line at Countdown so that you can stop and just experience God's grace in your life, but maybe even talk to somebody next to you in the line to extend God's grace to somebody in your life. Maybe for you it's not multitasking this week. You're just going to sense this invitation from God to focus on one thing at a time instead of 3 or 4 things at a time. I don't know what the invitation is for you, but I believe God's inviting you to slow down long enough in some area of your life to experience God's grace in your life. And then the second question is this: in what area of your life do you need to slow down long enough to extend God's grace to others in your life? Not only to experience His grace, but to also extend God's grace to somebody else in your life. That's the second question I'd love to leave you with this morning. When asked what was the key to living a successful Christian life, what was the number one thing you should do in order to follow Jesus well in life, the great philosopher and author Dallas Willard responded to that question with a simple line. He said this: you need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. You want to know what it looks like to follow Jesus successfully in life? You want to know what it looks like to follow Jesus and extend His love to other people in life? Dallas would say it's actually simple. Not easy, but simple. Ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. So here's the bottom line that I want to leave you with this morning. I like to remind myself every single day. This is a little bit of a mantra, a soundtrack that I repeat to myself all throughout the day. I say it this way: Jason, life is not a race, so live at a slower pace. Jason, life is not a race, so live at a slower pace. That's my hope for you this week, and I'd love to pray for you that God would allow you to live that out as you walk with him at a pace of grace. Let's pray together. Father, thank you. Thank you for the grace that you extend to us in our lives. Thank you for the fact that we can slow down, even in a culture that says that everything needs to be further, faster, and bigger is better. In a culture that celebrates and rewards speed, God, thank you for the invitation just to come away, to get away with you and to watch how you lived life. Thank you for the example that you gave us in this story of Jairus and his daughter and this woman that you healed, knowing that this 12-year period would all culminate in this one day, and there's no need to rush. God, I pray that you would give each of us the courage to do what you've invited us to do with this morning. This week, I pray, give us the courage, Lord, to live at a slower pace, that we might both experience and extend your grace to others. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.